Welcome to Mind Fitness Warriors. This is an online interview series where we are connecting with Mind Fitness Warriors all over the world who have gone through the deepest valleys of mental health and risen out the other side and are here to share their triumphs, their recovery, and some of the raw and real true experiences that they went through on their mental health journey. Today, I am so excited to be sharing the stage with Helen Hope of the UK. She is the founder of Knoxx, which is a fashion brand. And also she has started the Instagram page, Mental Health is Trending, after her own personal journey with mental health. And Helen, welcome. First off, just welcome. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us today and doing this interview and sharing your heart and sharing your story. And what I would love to do, I want to get into why you started Knoxx, the fashion brand, and why you started Mental Health is Trending, because you are picking up a ton of speed there. And I see that on your Instagram page, you've got stories from all over the world, which is so amazing to see people sharing their journeys. And before we dive into that, I want to hear about your story. I want to hear about what it is that you went through that has brought you to this point. So share with us, where this all started and take us through those steps in that journey that you've been through.
Yeah, so I suppose it's probably good, like any story, to start from the beginning. As a child, I grew up, I'm an 80s kid, so I grew up in a time where sort of mental health wasn't really talked about that much, but also learning difficulties wasn't spoken about either. I was diagnosed with dyslexia when I was about 7, something that my mum really pushed hard to kind of get the school to acknowledge, because they recognised the fact that I was a little bit slower than some of the other kids in terms of reading and numerical classes, but they just thought maybe like I wasn't paying attention at school. And my mum pushed quite hard for that to get reviewed. When they finally diagnosed me with dyslexia, it was kind of like a bit of a taboo subject, because it was like, well, what have you got? Learning difficulties is just like mental health. It can vary from one degree all the way to another. And I struggled a little bit early on, like at school. So when I found this out, and other people in my class found this out, I was sort of labelled as like the dumb kid in class, which no child wants to be singled out, for anything in school. But back then, and I'm not sure how they deal with it now, because obviously being a lot older, but you got extra time in classes, exams and things like that. You were singled out. You had your own section that you sat in. I had special needs classes, which were great for my education, but it very much made me feel like I was like very different to the other people in my class. So that initially was something that I felt really kind of knocked my confidence in a really sort of like key point in like a child's like growth period. It was something that kind of like was a cloud like over me a little bit. So that knocked my confidence early on. And then I always remember being, as a very young child, again, like from the age of 6 and 7, I come from a family of I've got 2 sisters who are both older than me. So there's a lot of women in my house. My eldest sister's 13 years older than me, and when I was younger, I used to look up to her and just think she was beautiful, like any young child does. And my middle sister is 3 years older than me, but we all look very different. My middle sister is biologically from both of my parents, but my elder sister is only from my mum's side, so we all look quite different. And Sarah, being that lot older than me, was going through her body transformations, as a teenager, and would tend to sort of put herself down, and sort of like I suppose she wasn't confident about her body. In the same, on the flip side of that, my mum wasn't either, because they were both felt like they were struggling with their weight. So I learned very early on as a young child from looking at both my mum and my sister that you can only be beautiful if you're, stick thin. And I suppose that that was a really key thing for me as a child, because, you know, I always felt self-conscious, because I looked at both of those two people and felt that they were both beautiful in their own right as a child, but couldn't understand why they didn't think that they were beautiful. So that was the beginning of my journey, really, because then I started to sort of overanalyze like who I was as a person. And I remember, you know, memories as early as maybe like 6 or 7, being in BHS changing rooms, trying on a swimming costume and crying because I felt like my body wasn't good enough, and looking in the mirror and seeing these baby adverts of, you know, these peachy little babies' bums, and seeing, you know, like cellulite or, you know, marks on my skin that weren't the same as what, you know, these peachy bums were that you'd see on the TV. So from a really, really young age, like I scrutinized myself completely. And that led on to sort of my teens. So when I finally did reach adolescence, and I went to an all-girls school, which obviously like is just a minefield of, you know, like hormones and kind of you know, girls kind of doing the same thing, scrutinizing their bodies. And that I suppose was the time where things weren't great for me. I had very low self-esteem, and on the, you know, I watched a video of you talking to Dara like the other day. I've never been a wallflower, you know. I've always been outgoing and chatty, and probably what other people perceive to be as confident. But you know, when somebody who is perceived to be confident puts themselves down, it can look like they're trying to seek attention, because I know that other girls would look at me and go, you know, well, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, why are you complaining about what you look like? But to me, in my head, I never felt good enough. I never felt like worthy in my teens. And I suppose like that kind of triggered off a whole load of other things that happened to me. I was bullied quite badly at school. And looking back on it, I can kind of understand why, because I opened the door for things to happen to me. You know, I found it very difficult to stand up for myself. Found it very difficult to sort of, if somebody made a joke about the way I looked, I couldn't just take it as a joke. I would take it very, very personally and very seriously. And this went on through the whole of senior school, led right up, and the bullying got so bad whilst I was at school that my parents were called into school multiple times, but I didn't actually know this because my parents agreed with each other that they decided that they weren't going to tell me that they were coming into school because they didn't want the bullying to get worse. But this sort of reached its sort of fever pitch when I was about probably about 16, 17. Sorry, no, I'm jumping ahead here. When I was about 13 or 14, it got particularly bad to the point where my best friend's mum got called into school because a girl tried to attack me. My friend stood in and she ended up getting beaten up by somebody. And it got that bad that my best friend's mum had said, you can't be friends with this girl anymore because she's too much trouble. Now that was heartbreaking for me because I felt like I didn't have anybody around me already, and then to have my best friend pulled away from me, it was, you know, it felt like it was my fault and like I sort of deserved it. So when I was about 13 or 14, I met a boy, as you do, you know, like when you're young, who I felt like was, you know, my parents sort of told me don't go near this guy because he's bad news, but I felt like I didn't have anybody else around me, and so I kind of got into this relationship with somebody that maybe like I wasn't grown up enough to sort of understand, and I felt like he was, you know, my everything. But as you know, as teenagers are and kind of young boys are, he ended up getting with my best friend at school. So again, like I was heartbroken. You know, it sounds very trivial and kind of like childish, but as a young child, when you're, you know, you're just craving love and you're craving attention from somebody who cares about you, it was very like traumatic for me. So I came home from school and I was, you know, I felt like nobody really cared about me. I felt like my parents weren't acknowledging the fact that, you know, I was being bullied horrendously at school. I felt like my boyfriend didn't care about me because he cheated on me. My best friend was no longer there for me, and I just felt like I had nobody. So this might sound like a bit childish, like in the sense, but I came home and I just got a whole load of pills on my bed, and I started putting them out into patterns on my bed, and it was almost like I disconnected myself from what I was about to do, but in a sort of like childlike way. But I also knew that I didn't want to be there as well. And I just felt like I'd given up. I felt like I'd given up on sort of like being on this planet. And I just started taking the tablets. And now, like, the reason why I'm not emotional about it and I can talk about it so matter-of-factly is because I sort of, as I've got older, disconnected myself from that person who I was when I was a child, because it's so far away from who I feel I am today. But as a child, I just felt like I was worthless, and I'd got to the point where that I just felt like it would be better off for everybody if I wasn't here. So I just carried on taking the tablets, and I obviously, like, you know, as the tablets started to take hold, I kind of went unconscious. And I just remember waking up feeling violently sick from these tablets. So I'd gone unconscious, and I jumped up and I ran through to the ground floor bathroom, and I was being sick. And then I must have passed out unconscious again, because the next thing I remember is my mum coming in to the bathroom. They'd been working late and hadn't come home, so they luckily had found me. And my mum, I was freezing cold because it was all the lights were off in the house, and it was just me alone, like on the tile floor. And she said to me, you know, what's happened? Like, what have you, you know, are you okay? Because there's vomit everywhere. And I said, the first thing that came to my head was, I've got food poisoning. And I just lied and told her I had food poisoning. And I didn't tell her exactly like what had happened for another probably 8 years. I never shared it with her. I was violently sick for probably about 3 days. I wasn't in school. I was just basically throwing up water because I was being sick for that long. I never went to hospital, and I'm really lucky that, you know, that nothing happened. Well, I don't know like whether there is any long-term damage, but, you know, I'm really lucky to still be here, because, you know, it wasn't a half-assed attempt. It was, you know, I was taking it quite seriously, but I just felt too ashamed to let her know what I'd done. We've spoken prior to this, but, you know, I haven't even told my own father that, like, before this video. But moving forward from when that happened, I left school, and I tried to sort of, because school was such a painful time for me, I tried to completely remove myself from anything to do with, you know, my school, basically. And I moved forward, and I went to college. I went to art school, and if you look at pictures like of me then, it's like the stereotypical kind of person acting out. You know, I had a mohawk. Like, you look at me now and I've like got long, like, blonde hair and like very preppy looking, but if you look at like pictures of me, it was like somebody who was just trying to find themselves. Like, you know, I had every hair colour going. You know, I went into fashion, so I was just experimenting with everything. And I suppose, like, I went through this like metamorphosis during that period of time where I was trying to find myself. So I felt much happier and a lot more confident. I moved down to London, started my career, and things sort of shifted, and I seemed to sort of take a turn for the better. But then a few years living in London, I decided to move back to Liverpool, where my family was, and start my own business, where I ended up meeting a guy, and I became really happy, and I fell in love, and like we decided that we were going to go travelling together. But there was something about the relationship that wasn't 100%. And I suppose, like, having had what had happened to me as a child, I just remember in my 20s just always craving, like, I wanted a boyfriend. I didn't know what I wanted in a partner, but I just wanted a boyfriend, because I felt like if somebody loved me, that I felt I was validated. Anyway, I found a relationship, and we decided quite early on, it was quite a whirlwind of romance, but we decided very early on that we were going to go travelling together. And fast forward probably 8 months, we ended up going travelling together. But I remember the first day that we went travelling, thinking to myself, I didn't know it was anxiety at the time. And I remember feeling anxious as what I know is anxious now, but at the time I wasn't really sure what it was. I thought maybe I was just nervous about going away or whatever, but it wasn't. It was that I wasn't sure about the relationship. But we went traveling, and anybody that's been traveling knows that, you know, a lot of it can be alcohol fueled. You know, you're mixed with like lots of different characters and people that, you know, like aren't your family and aren't you like people who really know you, and it can be quite an intimidating sort of yes, life-changing experience, but it can be quite an intimidating experience for somebody who is, you know, mentally ill or struggling with mental illness, whether they know it or not. And the first day that we were there, I ended up having to go and see a pharmacist because I thought they diagnosed me with vertigo. Because obviously I've been on the plane, and, you know, like they thought maybe there was something wrong with my inner ear. But I ended up having this vertigo for a good like couple of weeks that I was away, and it just wouldn't go away even with treatment. And I just, again, put it down to the medication not working, and I tried to not drink as much whilst I was away. And eventually, I suppose, like as I eased into the trip, it sort of phased off. But then this relationship lasted 4 years, and for anybody that's sort of lived abroad or moved abroad, it can be quite a challenging experience. You know, you're not surrounded by your family, you're trying to find a job, you're moving house, you know, like everything that you probably could throw at somebody in terms of stress, you've got all thrown into a mixed bag. And you need somebody, whether, you know, if you're not the strongest of person, having somebody who's maybe not right for you, and a relationship that's not good for you is not a great thing, because you latch onto something that's not very stable, which is exactly what I did. And this relationship ended up going on for 4 years. And I think if you spoke to him, he'd agree, you know, it was quite a toxic relationship for both of us, because we brought out the worst in each other. And I was very unhappy for a long period of time. So when it finally reached sort of towards the end of the relationship, I felt like I was a shell of myself. I ended up going into therapy, and I was in therapy for 1.5 years. It took me 6 months speaking to a counsellor and a therapist to sort of get me to the point where I was ready to break up with this person who I was like addicted to, that I knew wasn't right for me. On top of that, I wasn't doing very well in my current role. I lived in Qatar at the time, like we'd moved to the Middle East, and I was going into work every day and I was crying all the time and really, really struggling with to just do my day-to-day job. But I was very fortunate in the sense that the company that I worked for was a bit like a family environment, and my boss had also experienced anxiety and depression, so she was very open with me about sharing her own feelings. But initially, when I was going through all of this, I put it down to the breakup and, again, maybe having vertigo. But when I was finally referred by a psychotherapist to go to a psychologist, I think I then started to come to terms with the fact that it was probably something bigger than what I'd originally thought, and there was a lot of things that I hadn't dealt with as like a child. So once I started going to this therapist and counsellor, I suppose I started to feel back to myself. You know, I started to feel like it was okay to be me, and like I felt good. And then out of nowhere, my company decided to move the whole office from Qatar to Dubai, which I thought was everything I'd ever wanted. And, you know, like I'd always wanted to live in Dubai. That was my goal and that was my dream. And we moved, and it just felt like life throws things at you, but it just felt like from the minute I landed in Dubai that things started to go wrong. My company started to... the profits were dropping off because of like changes that had happened in Dubai economically, and they let like quite a few staff go, and I was one of the staff that got made redundant. So that again knocked my confidence, and I felt like really panicked about what I was going to do financially, and the stresses of that kind of like started to build up. Fast forward 6 months, I found another job, and I'd managed to sustain myself financially, but you know, it was still again hard, like starting a new job, and I don't think I'd really recovered from what had happened to me before. So I started this new job, and 6 months after they'd employed me, they let me go. So it was again another kick in the teeth, and I sort of like, where am I going now? Like, what next? So after that, you know, it was kind of like a whirlwind, and it was only in the space of a year, but you know, I went from like applying from job to job to job to job with my, you know, I'd worked in the Middle East for 8 years, and I'd saved like, you know, so much money from from working so hard, and I could just see my bank balance doing this, like that, you know, over the months that I was there because I wasn't earning. I took a new position that was at it was at like a marketing agency, and it was doing events, which was totally out of my comfort zone, like something that I'd never done before. And whilst I was there, this is when the panic attacks started, because I remember being sat at my desk one day and there's a guy sat next to me and it felt like there was an earthquake. And I just looked at him and I said, "Did you feel that?" And he was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And I was like, "What the hell was that?" And then I just sort of tried to carry on. And I went into the bathroom and I looked at myself in the mirror and I was thinking maybe I need glasses or something, you know, like I was squinting my eyes and stuff, trying to figure out what it was. And I just dismissed it. And I think, like, you know, I've always been the type of person that's really into self-help. So I knew that I was maybe going through a bit of a rough time, and I was listening to like Tony Robbins podcasts and reading The Secret and doing everything to try and get my mood in a good place and try and be positive. I was getting up and going running at 5:30 in the morning, you know, trying to sort of like pull the success out of me and try and make me, you know, make me feel like I was doing something right with my life. But I was obviously very much in my head and thinking a lot about what my circumstances, how my circumstances were. And this continued, like, you know, this shakiness sort of continued to the point where I was getting up and I was trying to walk and I felt like I was sort of going to fall over because this shakiness in my head just wouldn't go away. And I was all the time just trying to crack on and carry on doing my job. And I knew that because I was doing this work placement that I just had to keep going because I needed to get a job. So I was just trying to mask this kind of like physical feeling that I had the whole time, which added to the stress because I was worried, you know, I'm on probation, like, are they going to take me on? You know, they're taking a risk by employing somebody that this isn't their background. So I sort of kind of like just pushed through, and looking back on it now, I can't believe I pushed through for as long as I did because, you know, I was in pain, like with what I was going through. One day my boyfriend took me to the mall and we were just walking through Virgin Megastore, and I had to go and return something at the desk. And because I was that much of a bag of nerves and a mess, I felt like, you know, I felt like everybody was staring at me. I felt like really self-conscious. And I went to this desk and I went to return something, and the lady was disputing the date on my receipt. And because she started arguing with me, I just wasn't in the frame of mind to be having a discussion with somebody. I just broke down in tears and I collapsed because my legs stopped working. And they did a tannoy. It was so embarrassing. I was mortified. The lady thought I was a right drama queen, and then had to bring my boyfriend over, and he was, you know, he was like, "What's going on?" So we ended up going to the hospital. They did. I told them all my symptoms of how I've been feeling: the dizziness, the weakness, the like, you know, felt like I couldn't get out of bed, my motivation. And they, in the Middle East, when you're not on medical cover, the doctors there, they make, obviously with it being the medical industry, they make a profit from obviously having you do tests and things like that. So this worsened my financial situation because they did an ECG on me, they did several blood tests on me, and everything came back like negative. So that made my fears even worse because I was like, well, maybe I'm just imagining this. Maybe I'm crazy. You know, like I don't understand what's wrong with me. And that was a really, really stressful time because I got to the point where I couldn't even leave the house. Like I was shaking all the time. Like I just remember Andy took me to the doctors one day, and I had to hold on to him to get into the doctors because I was just such a mess. Like, you know, like I felt like I convinced myself that I had like a brain tumor because my grandfather died of a brain tumor when he was very young, and I convinced myself it was hereditary, and you know, I had all these diseases. And then my mum phoned me one day, and I used to lie to people as well. I would tell people that I'd got out of bed or that I'd done things, but in truth, I'd not moved from the sofa and I'd just been staring at the ceiling for the entire day. My boyfriend would come to see me, and I would get in the shower 10 minutes before he'd arrive, and I'd have spent pretty much the entire day just on the sofa, either crying or sleeping, which, you know, is just not normal. Like, not normal. I hate using the word normal, but it's not healthy, you know, to be in that frame of mind for a long period of time. So my mum FaceTimed me, and she could see, everybody that spoke to me could just see this withdrawn person. Like, they could see, you know, that like the light had gone, like, from behind my eyes. And my mum just said to me, look, I want to pay for a ticket to get you home. I think you need to come home and like get medical treatment. So I sort of like battled her on it for a little bit, because I felt like if I came home that it was kind of giving up, you know, like everything that I'd worked so hard for. But she convinced me that it would just be for a short period of time. I could see a doctor for free in the UK, and that I could get help. And so I did. I got on a plane, flew back to the UK. The next day I went to the doctors, and the doctor instantly diagnosed me with chronic anxiety and panic attacks. I never even knew what a panic attack was until she sort of taught me through, like, you know, how it can affect you. And I was just baffled by how I was convinced it was something more serious. Like, not that it's not serious, but I was convinced that, no, that you need to do more tests. Like, there must be something wrong with me. She was like, try this medication, see how you feel. Like, come back to me in a couple of weeks' time, like, after you've been taking this medication. So I went away, did what she told me to do, and I started to feel better. But during this time, I suppose this brings me on to sort of like how my business started then, because I kind of felt like I was in this hopeless state, which is quite funny because my surname's Hope. So, like, to be hopeless is quite hilarious to me, because I hear the word hope all the time because it's my name. But I was in this sort of hopeless state, like, and I'm a really energetic person. I'm very driven when it comes to my career, and like, I've got high hopes for myself in terms of like what I want to achieve in my life, which I suppose why is, I ended up in the Middle East in the first place, because it was always my dream to sort of live abroad. And I just felt like I'd almost like lost everything, even though I knew I'd come back for my health, I felt like I'd lost everything. So I was like, what can I do to sort of turn this experience into a positive? So I've been writing books and things like that, like, for a long time now. Like, I've been trying to write a book myself for a long time, and I felt like I wanted to sort of journal my mental health journey, because I felt like that was my own way of therapy. So I started to do that, and thought, it might be a good idea to start a blog. So I spoke with my sister who works in sort of marketing, and she was discussing with me like ideas, like bouncing ideas around. And then we decided that like a great name for it would be Heart Knoxx, because, the heart knocks and the knocks you let get in life, and the flutters and the excitement when you have highs and the disappointments when you have low, it kind of encompasses that and what was happening to me at that time. But as I was sort of developing this idea, like, I really wanted to monetize it and kind of make it into a sustainable income for myself, because obviously, you can earn a living from blogging, but it's not an instant thing that happens. So I decided to use my background in fashion to hook up with that, and to create sort of my own fashion lines that kind of like displayed, positive messages on there, but also touch on the mental health angle. And that sort of took me forward to how Heart Knoxx evolved as a brand, as a fashion label. But then on the flip side of that, I felt like that I really wanted to kind of create something where other people could share their stories, and also, like, wear their I'm fine t-shirts with pride, to say like either that they've struggled with it or they support, people, family members, and share their stories. So I set up the page Mental Health is Trending. That's only been going just over a month now, but we've got over 4,000 followers already, and we've had some like really great celebrity interest on that as well. So there's quite a few like UK, I mean, you may not know them, Jennifer, but a few people who are sort of popular on UK TV here that are starting to endorse the brand now, which is amazing. And like, I can't actually even believe, like, how quickly it's starting to take off. But yeah, like, it's been a bit of a whirlwind, and I feel really good now about, like, and I feel really happy to sort of share my story with other people, because I think that the secrecy and the kind of like the shame that you feel adds to the anxiety and the you know, the stigma that is around. And I think the reason why people feel the way they do so much now is because they feel like they have to paint this picture perfect lifestyle. And I think living in a place like Dubai, which is very glamorous, you know, very, you know, I mean, if you saw pictures of like what my life looked like in Dubai, like you'd think I was living the dream. I mean, I interviewed a girl called Chelsea when I was at my old company, and she ended up posting after I wrote an open letter on Instagram to sort of basically share what I was doing, and to start the kind of like the ball rolling on the 1st of Mental Health Month. And I got an open letter back from this girl that I'd interviewed, and she met me over Skype, just like we're talking now, interviewed for a job, and she wanted a position at the company that I was working at. And she thought my life was perfect. She added me on Instagram because she was nosy. And then once I'd shared this open letter and she saw what I was actually going through, she couldn't believe it, because she was going through exactly the same thing herself, but she just thought that my life was perfect and she wanted what I had, when in actual fact, nobody would have wanted what I had, because, you know, from what everything I've just shared with you. So yeah, and that's how kind of Heart Knoxx and mental health is trending came about.
Wow, that it's so amazing. And I'm so grateful that you have, you know, that you've shared this story with us, because even just hearing, and so many of the interviews that we do, you know, I'm seeing that trend, right? That when we start from childhood, and what did we go through at that time? What did we go through, you know, when we were younger, when we were molding ourselves, when we were still creating who we were going to be, and, you know, with those hardships, those hard knocks, right? That we go through from those ages, and how that carries with us our entire lives. And we structure, you know, the word that comes to mind when you were telling your story for me was just craving love. And
oh, massively, yeah.
You know, and that's,
I just wanted to be accepted, I think, like, and I think I try and teach my nephews now, like when I look at them and my niece or whatever, that you don't have to be liked, you know, like you just have to be you, like, and like love yourself, because, you know, people are always going to judge you no matter what, but as long as you're okay with who you are, that's the most important thing. As long as you can sleep at night, you know, with who you are, then that's the important thing.
And so I love that you're doing what you're doing. I love that you're speaking out about this, and I love your mental health is trending Instagram page. I love seeing
Thank you
that you are sharing, and the people that are coming out with their stories, and being okay with now publicizing that, right? And saying, hey, this is what I've been through, this is what I've gone through, but now I'm fine, and now I'm here, and I'm here to love and accept who I am and my journey and what I've been through. And I want to share that with people, and I want people to know you can still triumph and be successful, and you know, make it, even though you went through something that's been very hard. Yeah, so beautiful sharing this space with you, Helen. I'm so glad we're friends, and to just watch each other grow through these journeys, because it is so beautiful just to see, as we're coming together, to be able to really create this shift, right? And we share those same visions and those same missions to be able to bring equality between physical and mental health, and to allow people to have a platform to share their journeys, share their stories, and also start to kind of come out of the closet with it.
Yeah, definitely.
So I love that you're doing that. So we're going to, we are going to put all your credits here up on the screen so people can connect with you and follow everything you're doing, and grab a t-shirt and
yeah, that would be amazing.
Awesome brand, because I absolutely love it. So once again, thank you so much, Helen, for sharing this space and for sharing your story and taking us through that journey. And all the best to your blogs and your brands, and mental health is trending. And please give Helen a follow and watch all these journeys as they unfold. So thank you so much again. And for those of you that are possibly joining for the first time, I just want to ask you to subscribe to this channel so you can get notifications whenever a new episode drops, so that you can hear all these beautiful stories and share them with someone that you feel would be really aligned and drawn to hearing them as well. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Helen. And
thank you.
next episode.
Thanks, Jennifer.